These lunch labs, if you want to click to the next slide, are, as we mentioned, part of a series. We try to make some space at least every other month to be able to get together for some conversations. They can take different forms. Sometimes we're sharing models from the community, like resource equity. We had Caleb on here. Sometimes we're addressing, interesting strategic questions that we think would be helpful for the movement to be able to talk to each other. And that's our focus today, is really kind of one of these big questions, as well as, getting into some models that are practicing how we build out this new model of an economy. And as to our lunch labs, we're happy you're here today. You'll continue to get the invites if anyone's interested in helping to sponsor these or being a promotional partner to get the word out further. We'd love to hear from you as well. So you can reach out to myself, and Laura on the call is doing the digital facilitation. And I think we have other of the lab leader team from People's Economy Lab on the call. I see Shiho Fuyuki on here and Jiguna Gashuro. I believe Faduma Fido will be on as well. So feel free to reach out to any of us around these lunch labs if you want to connect further. All right, and let's get to the program. So please, we want to welcome you into the room. Everyone here is invited to, be on screen if you're available. We'll, have our featured guests to be able to help center the conversation. But we expect to invite you all to share as well. We'll have certainly some opportunity for Q&A. We'll have a little poll pop up and an opportunity to share your thoughts. So it's more of a dialogue as the ultimate goal of these, less of a formal presentation today. So feel free to take a moment right now to share in the chat, as the slide showed, your name, organization, and what drew you today. Any questions or topics as well as that you want to make sure we cover. Anything that's been on your mind around the topic today is also welcome in the chat, even before we get to the Q&A section. So let's get into today's conversation. I'll take just a quick moment to introduce our guests, Tiffani McCoy and Pearl Nelson. As I mentioned, Tiffani is the interim CEO at Seattle Social Housing Developer. And before that, she served as the co-executive director of House Our Neighbors, which was a key to the coalition that established this new social housing developer through 2 voter-approved initiatives. She's been working in this field for a long time. She spent 7 years at Real Change, focused on issues of homelessness, and where she was an advocacy director. And we have some kids around the same age that are going to be hopefully playing together more in the future. So thanks for being here, Tiffani. And then Pearl, welcome, Pearl. And yeah, maybe we can take down the screen actually, and at least we can see. There we go. Okay, everybody there. If we can see, I don't know if there's a way to feature Pearl and Tiffani, but Pearl is the homeownership associate at Homestead. But Pearl's really worked across the industry in different aspects, and that's why I'm really excited to hear from Pearl around Homestead model of land trust, but also Homesite. Worked at Homesite previously on real estate development, also as a real estate agent, and does additional nonprofit work in this whole question of housing and housing ownership. So I like to think about Tiffani's really brought forward this deep social housing model, has gone deep and followed through, and Pearl has this broad experience across the industry. So hopefully we'll have some great perspective to bring.
About the jobs.
And then if you're not on mute, if you take a moment from now while we do the intros, you can do that. So I just want to give a chance now first for Pearl and Tiffani. Anything else you guys want to add in terms of background, anything we should know about you going into this conversation?
I guess I can go.
Sure.
I don't want to just jump in, but my name is Pearl Nelson. I am very grateful to be here. Northwest born and bred, moved here fairly early. So I guess I can tell my story a little bit. I don't want to get too deep, but grew up in Skyway, South Seattle, Rainier Beach, South Shore, Campbell Hill. And I grew up with thank you, Mr. Jaguna. He's also a Skywayan. No, but grew up in South Seattle, but was really raised from a family of renters. We definitely paid off a couple people's mortgages growing up. So I really grew a passion figuring out how to create home ownership opportunities for my community and myself. And that was really important to me. So that kind of got me here to this journey.
Thanks, Pearl. Yeah, and Tiffany, anything, yeah, else you want us to know about you as we get started here?
I would say that I'm excited to be on the panel. I'm excited to talk about like non-market interventions to meet our housing needs. And yeah, I grew up in a low-income family and I was rent burdened for a very long time, unstably housed in my first couple of years of undergrad, and also just working with our unhoused neighbors at Real Change, which we'll get into like why social housing and why everything that Pearl does later, but I'll just say that we just really are not meeting the need. And even though there are really critically important interventions that are happening, please no one get me wrong. We have to be really honest that what we're doing is not enough and is never going to meet the need. So I'm looking forward to talking about what we can be doing in addition to all the great things we are already doing as a city and region.
Great. Thanks, Tiffany, for help setting that context. Yeah, and then thanks all of you for being here. I'm not an expert in this area, so we're going to really rely on all of you to help make this, the most fruitful conversation it can. And I'm here really because we were thinking about as a group just how we kind of navigate some of these tensions as we think about what we need, and particularly this tension between kind of ownership and non-market interventions and the different needs of community and the different strategies to help fulfill those. So People's Economy Lab organizes in part around this idea of a just transition. We're going through a lot of transition in our economy, and will it be a just one, and where will we land? But in part of these transitions, in creating, trying to build the economy we know we need, we're also living in the economy we have, and we have to navigate the contradictions of aspiring and building towards that future, while also dealing with our realities. And for me, this question that we're focusing on today is a lot caught up in that. Um, we have an urgent need to address, the great and growing racial wealth gap. And that's a real need. And we also have, these contradictions of living in a capitalist housing market that is making it less affordable for everyone all the time. And we're in an exciting era to be in because we're experimenting in real time with all these different approaches, at the same time kind of feeling this pressure, with obviously pullbacks from the federal level, but even kind of budget questions at the state and local level, putting political pressure on the traditional models we've been trying to, at the same time, housing costs have continued to grow. I think Tiffany told me something like 95% of our housing stock is still under private ownership, right? So how do we think about that in the context of this question? And a lot of our work is driven, whether we realize it or not, by these kind of narratives about what housing it is, what wealth it is. And part of the conversation today is how do we kind of bring up, daylight some of those narratives, ask questions about them, interrogate them to be able to get to a better and stronger place together. So I'm going to start out just asking our guests, and maybe I'll start with you, Tiffany, just to talk about the model that you've been building on for a long time through, conception of ballot measure to now implementation as the interim CEO. And can you tell us about kind of why this proposal, what were the outcomes that you thought would be different from, the strategies we had in place, as well as any kind of risks? But yeah, maybe just explain the social housing to the group.
Yes. I'll be mindful of time, but I think it is really important to set the table for where social housing came from. And that is really from my time working at Real Change as the advocacy director. We worked a lot on immediate needs with the vendors that sell the paper. I'm sure people in this room have a Real Change vendor that they buy the paper from. But working on increasing shelter, increasing housing and essential needs funds, making sure that we're putting more money into affordable housing. When I was at Real Change, we were also part of 2 lawsuits against the city of Seattle to stop the sweeps of our unhoused neighbors with no place to go, which causes tremendous harm and trauma. And so I took depositions of people who were on really long waiting lists or had a medical ailment that threw them into homelessness, or can't live in certain areas because of domestic violence situations. So after a couple of years, it was just really dawning on me that we have such a massive gap of tools that we're using to address our housing crisis at scale. So, a charter amendment was floated by the Chamber of Commerce and other business interests in 2019 or 2021, excuse me, and we decided to create a coalition with community members to fight back against that charter amendment, and that was called Compassion Seattle. Out of that defeat, we held a retreat of the steering committee, which were folks that do mutual aid work, stop the sweep support, abolitionists, ending the carceral state, and also tech workers. I sometimes oversee, but there are tech workers that want to make sure everyone can live in the city of Seattle. And we put forward a social housing initiative because, again, if we're just really honest with ourselves, if lawmakers were honest, they would say that we do not have a plan to meet the need of our housing crisis. There is no plan to meet the scale of the need. And instead of that being something that is like creating this like fatalism, it allows us the opportunity to look outside of our own borders to see what other countries are doing in order to meet the need, like one of our most basic human needs. And that's where social housing came from. And what we see social housing as additive. It's a yes and. We need community land trust. We need limited equity co-ops. We need our nonprofit affordable housing developers. We need public housing authorities. But we also need social housing that has different outcomes and meets a different need. So we are a permanently affordable housing model that is publicly owned in perpetuity. It is prohibited for us to sell any of our buildings ever. We are also available to a larger income mix. We go up to 120% of the area median income because folks are becoming more and more rent burdened across the board. And we are also free from market speculation. Again, we're not looking at these buildings as assets on a balance sheet to go sell for a short-term gain in order to make more money for the agency. We are building out housing as a public good, as public infrastructure. And that was really exciting enough to where voters passed a social housing developer and then also funded it with an excess compensation tax, a new funding source last year to the social housing developer. So we are acquiring and building housing. We are actively looking at land sites. So those are the different outcomes. These are public assets. We should be creating housing as public infrastructure, just like we do our libraries, our roads, and our schools. And then just briefly on the risks. The risks were that universal programming in the United States is anathema. We means test the heck out of everything, which creates income cliffs, benefits cliffs. We had vendors at Real Change that would work a side job, make a couple $100, even maybe above $1,000 in their savings account. And they would get letters from the government saying that if you continue to have this level of savings, you will lose access to your voucher. You will lose access to this affordable housing unit, or you will lose access to the housing and essential needs program. So we are trapping people in poverty in our country. And then we are furthermore cementing their poverty in our affordable housing dynamics that are set by the federal government. The federal government says you cannot make $1, $2, $3 more than the threshold. Otherwise, you're going to be kicked out of this housing and you're going to have to go compete with a tech worker on the private market. And we should not be leaving our housing needs to the whims of the private market that is there at the end of the day for a profit. Our most basic human need of housing should be a public asset.
Thanks, Tiffani. Thanks for sharing that and for all your work. Moving forward, your leadership, it's amazing to see what's happened from that measure and all the momentum and waves it's created really across city, state, and far beyond. So yeah, Pearl, turning to you. So as I mentioned in the intro, you've really worked across different approaches and strategies. I would love to hear just a little bit more about how you came to those roles that work and how you're kind of looking at the current situation of different goals for different strategies, maybe kind of lining up a little bit of the models that Tiffani spoke to too in terms of the work you've done around land trust versus privately owned housing and that kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you again for having me here. So I will start with Homestead Community Land Trust and what we do as an organization. We make it possible for people otherwise that have been priced out of Seattle. Through the community land trust model, homeowners purchase the homes through Homestead, and you keep the sticks and bricks on top, as I like to say, and the land trust owns the land underneath. So that's important work, and I'm grateful. We're going to have 42 homes built this year, so that's something to for us as a small organization of about 12 to be proud of, and we're excited to be doing that. As far as the private market, I mean, it's tough. It's tough for people to buy homes, especially in Seattle. Uh, I'm fortunate to still be able to work in the Seattle housing market as a realtor from time to time. That's not my main focus, but when people ask me to help, I am there to help. And I was able to list a person's house like this month, and it's hard out there. Houses are really expensive. And as far as people coming through, we had maybe 3 people come through. You know, fortunate enough to get that home uh, pending appraisal, and it passed appraisal for them, which is great. But it's difficult for everybody. People are having to sell their homes. Not as many. It's not a seller's market. It's just the state of where we're at. But my main focus is not only to help people that are making 80% area median income buy homes. The people that are um, low to moderate income kind of find a way to still reside and stay in Seattle. That's one of my big passions. But um, I mean, it's just a difficult time for home buyers in general. And I would say, I've worked as a commercial realtor. I've worked as a residential realtor. I've worked in affordable housing and co-ops for Homestead, Home Site. And it's, I just, I'm not here to be, I don't want to do a philosophical conversation. I just love to create, from my experience, opportunity for people that do want to buy, and kind of give them the pathway to get to that end of that road, and support them in that way.
Thanks, Pearl. That's super helpful. And yeah, just bringing into the room, some of the previous lunch labs. I mentioned Caleb from Resource Equity, whose whole organization's mission is about helping, especially Black homeowners, use their home as an asset, right, and creating intergenerational wealth through that model. So that's, there's a lot of different models happening. We can't bring in all of them into this conversation, but I want to get into some of our questions here. And you both touched on this a bit, but housing is obviously a top issue for many people in our region. But it isn't, always just about a place to live. For some people, it's really also about economic security through ownership. And that's, like the peace of mind and knowing, you're storing wealth for the future in some ways. Maybe you can leverage that in some ways to keep your family secure and safe, versus it also is very much a place to live. So I'm just wondering, your perspectives on, is there a contradiction in that? Is it a contradiction to approach housing as both an asset for economic security and as kind of permanently affordable, place to live, shelter? Can it be both? Do we need to choose a direction? In any ways you all approach thinking about that? And yeah, Pearl, if you want to jump in first this time, if you're ready.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I can jump in. So as far as the organization goes, Homestead, we do limit the equity, but through that, we were able to create stability, equity, opportunity for people to have, essentially, a stability. So, people aren't displaced. And that's one of our main goals as an organization. Um, and we've seen it work. People are able to get in the homes, and kind of create stability where they live. Equity growth is at 1.5%, with Homestead or Home Site. The co-ops, they gain equity at 2%, and those are the models. I've seen them work, and that's kind of why I've decided to work with them. I think, with these different organizations, but also equity is important. As a person that's finally reached my personal goal of being a homeowner, um, I want to get equity for my home, but that's not the biggest point for me. It's like having a roof over my head. It's about making my inner child room where I get to, do this kind of work and find a place of peace. Um, but equity is important. Um, I don't think that, well, I don't want to say I don't think that. I think with some of these models, you're not going to build generational wealth. You're going to find stability. You're going to find an opportunity to stay and live in place. If there's an asset you can pass down like any other asset, any other asset, but also it's paying it forward. So by limiting the equity, you're able to give that opportunity to the next person when you do decide to sell. So that's why I think these models are important, but I think choice is important. you know Sometimes you might be able to buy in the open market, and that's a beautiful thing because you can gain equity at that tick. But these nonprofits that offer these limited equity models are important too, because you can still live in the neighborhoods you may have grew up in and find stability in that way. Hopefully I answered your question. Okay.
Absolutely. I don't think there's one, there's no solutioning here. We're just kind of
Yeah,
like wrapping
just
our heads around it.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Pearl. Tiffany, what are your thoughts on this question?
A lot. I think it's really interesting, and I think that, as you said, Derek, there are a lot of like contradictions, and there's a lot of even existential factors. So, for the social housing model, it is a rental model. But again, we're not there to make a profit. So we are creating housing across several income bands. We want people to make more money over their lifetime. We're looking to limit rent to 30% of income, but we would really, once we build up more of a portfolio, get more market power, bring those rents down to what you're seeing in other social housing areas of the world, where sometimes rent is 7 to 20% of your income. That's going to take a long time. Like, let me be really clear. There's no overnight solution. But once you start getting the non-market housing as more of a lion's share of the overall housing portfolio in a city, that's when you start to see direct pressure. So that should be like all of our goals, regardless of how we're intersecting into that overall broader goal. So I think that there is economic security in a lot of different ways, but I completely agree with Pearl. Like, this is about choice. A lot of people do want to be homeowners. There's a lot of different reasons for that, but there's a lot of people also who do not want to be homeowners. And I would say, especially in the time of climate change, when we are seeing insurance brokers dropping people because of environmental catastrophes, we need to be looking at housing. We've always needed to, but we need to be looking at it more holistically. Should we be looking at public insurance companies? Because we know that private insurance companies are going to continue to drop people as the climate crisis gets worse. And I hate to say that, but we're here to talk about these things. So I'm going to be bold and say that. So I think that economic security can come in a lot of different ways. Home ownership and rental market are going to continue to be subject to climate change as it goes, and whether or not people, whether they're a homeowner or a renter, have the ability to fix their home is going to be a question in the time of climate change. I think that like Pearl, I'm not trying to speak for you, but I think like what we're both also bringing is like we're trying to push back also a little bit against this very hyper individualistic notion in our country where like I'm only looking out for me, myself, and I. Like, what you're doing at Home Rise Pearl, you're creating community. Like, yes, we're creating units of housing, but we're creating communities. We're making sure that people can live together, grow together, age in place, that their neighbors can talk to each other, kids can play with each other. So we're just coming at this from a different models that are also serving the same goal. So I don't inherently think that economic security and permanent affordability are at odds theoretically. I think that they are in our country because of racialized capitalism, because of our hyper individualism, and because we put the onus on us as individuals to take care of ourselves individually as opposed to collectively. And I think that what Pearl and I and all of probably a lot of people in this room are doing is pushing it back against that from a collective space.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thanks for bringing in also the cost of ownership. It's not just all benefit, right? Like that maintenance piece, and then yeah, the community that both of you are creating around it, at least non-market. I see in the comments too, kind of like these non-market or non-financial values that are created. So I think we're going to take a moment now just to put a quick poll up, actually, to see, get a pulse of the room too around how you're thinking about some of these questions. So the question here is, what should we be prioritizing right now? Is it around this home ownership thing, peace in distressed communities, closing the racial wealth gap, permanently affordable housing, testing more democratic models of collective ownership, redistributing wealth and kind of that land shift piece. What speaks to you right now? What's at the top of your urgency list? And then we'll open up the Zoom here for a couple comments as well. But take a moment. Let us know what's speaking to you in the poll. And then if anybody wants to come off mute, we'll share a comment or two before the next question. We'd love to hear what you're thinking. Do the poll results just pop up, Laura?
I think once I end the poll, they should.
Okay, got it. Okay. Forgot how that
Give
works.
it just a couple more seconds and then I'll close.
Yeah, and while we're looking at this, anybody want to add any reflections from that first set of comments or on this question?
I kind of want to echo what Erica Malone said. I kind of want to say yes to all of them, you know? Yeah.
Thanks for calling that in. Okay. So a lot of the folks in the room are thinking about this kind of housing as permanently affordable, shelter as kind of the top of mind, as well as this kind of wealth gap issue and how maybe how property and land is used and getting land back. Thanks for taking a pause with us. Yeah, one more time, any other comments on this kind of opening question? How you're thinking about housing and this kind of, I guess, different strategies around wealth building versus permanently affordable housing?
Derek, if I could, can you hear me?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you facilitating this conversation. There was recently a piece in the New York Times by Kyla Scallion, talked about a lot of this, some of this, the contradiction in housing, how it has served both as a um, wealth building and retirement planning and shelter. And I wonder if we could talk more about the piece Tiffani brought up about this a shift, how we, how the nation was formed from land theft and individualistic gain, and how these, a lot of the work that you do at the People's Economy Lab and the folks on this call are really focused on rather than the tactical, but the behavioral change that we're trying to move in this country towards a more of caring for each other rather than trying to suck every last piece of profit we can out of the land and out of each other. Thank you. Oops.
Thanks, David. Yeah, anybody want to respond to that or add on to that? If
Maybe a way to simplify
Yeah.
the question is how do we advance the narrative of the collective well-being that we're trying to work towards? Because people tend to, it's easier to focus on the tactical approach rather than the well-being outcome, the collective well-being outcome. Are there ways to highlight that other side?
Thanks. Yeah, and I see Carl, your hand's up. You want to jump in?
Yeah. I just wanted to say this is sort of a question I struggle a little bit with in tenants organizing. I've had groups like Habitat for Humanity or Homesite approach the tenants association and be like, we think some of your members, I organize in low income housing. And they're like, we'd like to, show opportunities for home ownership or tell people in your membership about programming. And I think for a lot of people, that's what social advancement looks like. And I'm very uncomfortable to tell them no. At the same time, there's sort of a contradiction of trying to build solidarity or collective ownership of something, and then having the answer to that be an individualized version. I understand why people want that, and that's the game as we've played it. And so I want to have a more holistic conversation with my membership about maybe that option is going to look different for different people. But ultimately, there is a need for a different relationship with property and a redistribution of the country's original sin, So.
Thanks, Carl. Yeah, and actually that's a good segue to the next question I want to put out there, which is really about this question maybe looks different for different people in different groups. We know there's a big racial wealth gap between people of different races, Black, Latino, Indigenous. At the same time, housing insecurity affects these communities disproportionately. So should we be thinking about housing, this question, I guess, of housing as an asset and shelter differently, for different groups who have faced different forms of institutional racism, from redlining to, internment to, yeah, original displacement of Indigenous people, housing discrimination, all of this, still exists. Or are there other factors like, class that are playing in how we think about, this question? Is it really, maybe there's some nuance here that we could be thinking about. Yeah, so any response to that, Tiffany, Pearl, and then Maria, I'll circle back to you. Thank you. I see your hand up now.
Yeah, I would just say that, like, I'm not going to speak for any particular group about what I think is best for them. I want to be able to provide more choices for individuals to decide what is best for them. I think, though, that we have to look at our current housing ecosystem and what it is that we are offering people. We are offering people, as you said, Derek, at the top, 5 to 6% of the rental market that is owned in a non-market, non-commodified way. And then the rest is the private market that is there. At the end of the day, regardless of your thoughts on capitalism, the fiduciary responsibility of a for-profit venture is as much profit as possible. Or you can enter into a community land trust, limited equity co-op, or private home ownership. Those are the options before us. I want to provide communities, and the social housing developer and movement want to provide more opportunities for folks to build community, live in high quality housing regardless of your income, build that community up, have walkable neighborhoods, live in high quality climate resilient housing, and have the ability to grow wealth in a different way and stability in a different way. So I think that that's just what we're trying to offer. But I think that it is important for us to make sure that we are looking and very aware as the social housing developer that we don't, even though we are a permanently affordable asset for public housing, that we don't inadvertently become a gentrifier ourselves. So that is why, like, we have a lottery system when we have units available. We are looking at actually instituting the city's community preference policy so that we make sure that folks that are from that community are able to continue to live in the community and or return to Seattle after already being displaced, but they still work in the city of Seattle. So that is what we would be able to offer. Again, it is slow. I just really want a temperature check. We can, not in this room, but like we overly governments, leaders, means testing really wants like quick solutions. I mean, we should have started decades ago if we wanted to have that in place. The social housing developer, we are thinking about the long run. So it's going to take time, but we have a massive mandate, 2 voter approved initiatives. We have resources now and we're going out and we'll utilize those. But I think it's also important to keep checking in with communities and see what it is that they want and doing that community outreach, especially because the word social connotes socialism. Not everyone feels good about that. So we also need to go in and do some table setting and level setting and education there too, and listening.
And just to chime in a little bit, I agree choice is important. Outside of the organization that I work for, people have to have options and they have to have choice and to your own whim. Like if you want to be a part of a community land trust or a co-op or social housing, people should have these options on the table, be able to decide what works for them. Um, I think that's important. You gotta make those decisions for yourself. So yeah, options, choices are important.
Eric, if I could just add one more thing in, I think that we also need to kind of sit with the fact that because of how the federal government restricts affordable housing dollars, public housing dollars, and because of the pervasive notion that we should means test our programming, we are creating segregated neighborhoods. We are creating buildings that only low income individuals can live in. We are creating neighborhoods that are not high opportunity zones and only specific racial, ethnic, class demographics can live in. We should be creating a housing system where people can live in high opportunity zones and where we're creating those all over. So I think it's important for us to look at some of the current predominant tools and realize how those are actually perpetuating those systems.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I'm kind of noodling on that with also this kind of choice thing and like, how our choices are structured, right? Like, okay, when do we really have choice? When do the structures are kind of leading us to one place? When do we have information about the opportunities available, right? And it's tough. I was excited to see there were, I think, what is it, over 10,000 people who registered for that lottery. Is that right? Yeah. So, certainly that's a great expression of interest, right? And partly that's, probably built up from the momentum from the campaign. It's like done through a public process where people voted on it. So the awareness is high, but how do we keep up that kind of momentum so people are aware of choices when they have them and also understand what choices are structured and address the policy barriers that are keeping them. So thanks for offering that. Maria, I want to get back to you. Thanks for being patient.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So I just want to make a comment about something that I'm thinking about personally, and then I would love to ask a question. The first point is, as someone who's white and grew up, lower middle class, working class, but have a lot of privileges, I'm just personally thinking about, not that I could afford to buy in Seattle really anyways on the open market, but is it even moral for me to be buying on land that is stolen? Like, is that even right? Or because I would be a better steward and I'm aware of the issues, anyways, I'm just sort of noodling with the morality of owning stolen land, and with that said, before I ask the question, I'll just state maybe this is a really obvious thing that people in the sort of housing world are talking about. I, until recently, was working in global health, so I'm new to this housing piece, except for just being as a renter, living in Seattle. And so what I'm wondering is there talk in the sort of social housing world about that all of this work is being done on Indigenous lands? Is there work with tribes to get sort of permission or work with them or have, money going to the tribe be part of the budgets or part of the sort of fees or the rents associated with these communities that are being built? I would just love to know what the sort of thinking around the connection with Indigenous lands is in this world. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for that question. We did this through two initiatives. So there were stakeholder processes to draft the initiatives, and then we ran the initiatives and we reached out to community groups and got endorsements from multiple community groups, labor, some housing associations. So we're running with our mandate, which is to build permanently affordable housing that's publicly owned forever, free of market speculation and available to all, with a governing board that is the first time in the nation. So we are a 13-member governing board, 7 of which are renters. And those renters are now appointed by the Renters Commission, and in the future they will be elections in our buildings, and then they will select who is going to serve on that. So We do not have in the specifics of the mandate and the charter of the social housing developer those things that you brought up, Maria. So we always take a racial equity analysis to what we are doing when we're going into specific neighborhoods, especially high displacement areas. It's thinking about what we do in those areas and the outreach that we need to do, and also checking with other public development authorities that are more community and location based, like Community Roots and SCIPTA. So making sure that we're not bidding against each other and making the private market more money. But as far as those specific mandates, Maria, while we talk about those internally, our mandate and our fiduciary responsibility to the voters is to carry out building as much housing and acquiring as much housing as we possibly can so that we are creating housing as public infrastructure. So while we are talking about those things and we're very aware of those, we need to serve our mandate.
That's a tough question, Maria. I can't answer that question for, is it appropriate to, for you to be a homeowner? I mean, again, it goes back to choice, right? Like it goes back to choice, my friend. I can't answer that question for you, but if you do find in yourself to want to own a home, I mean, um, I guess you got to internalize that. It's a great question, but it's like it kind of like puts a knife in me and kind of turns it. I don't know. I don't know. It's I can speak to home sites. We definitely worked with the tribes, the Duwamish, even to get at, to be given the name, the opportunity to use the name Olu, which means gather. So I know home site as an organization definitely works with tribes, the Duwamish and the Puyallup, and that's a major focus for them. Um, and as far as home site, I know that over 80% of our homeowners are BIPOC, and that's, I think, important organizationally. It's just important, as it's just important. I know the organization is the organization and I work there, but I think me personally, um, um, I like to see people of color owning and in ownership opportunities, but I think everybody should have an opportunity, not based on color. Um, but that being said, Black and brown and people of color have been left out of home ownership opportunities through redlining and pushed out through gentrification, and we know that. Um, and if there's opportunities to bring people back, we should do that. Um, I want to do that. So outside of just what I do here, me personally, I just want to help everybody, as we've been saying, holistically. I want to help everyone, but also I have a passion for helping, personal passion for helping people reach that goal, that look like me, and that's how I feel personally. But also I want to help everybody. I think everybody has, if they want that as something for themselves, I will be here to help, whether it's as a realtor or pointing someone in the right direction. This home site, homestead, habitat, it might not be the right thing for you. Open market might not be the right thing for you. Renting might be the right thing for you. But I want people to have the resources, and there's resources out there. So you might not know of them, but if you need someone to help point you in the right direction, I'm happy to. Outside of organization, like this might work for you, this might work for you, this might work for you, and seeing what fits the person. That's a personal passion, so I do that outside of here. So sometimes people aren't able to benefit from the organizations that I've worked for, but this might work, or this program works. Hey, what about this down payment assistance program? What about, taking a class at the Washington State Finance Commission? Is that right for you? Get the information. What's right? So that's where I'm coming from personally. Yeah.
Thanks, Pearl. Tiffany, I'm going to throw one more big question in the room, then we're going to open it up. We'll start with you, Jesse, on that for any other questions or comments. So you just going on, right? Like all these different options and choices of, ways to get, trained up or assistance in ownership or into some of these co-op models. The Homestead, just acknowledged too, has seen great growth. It's really exciting to see kind of all the work that's happening on this land trust model, which is for so long, I feel like it was just like this idea out there, and the work of making it real is so important. So thank you for that. As well as kind of the growth of more other types of community ownership models, the creation of Seattle Equitable Development Initiative and now the King County Equitable Development Initiative supporting communities to come together to acquire land or housing. So what I'm wondering with kind of all this going on, and all these experiments is if we need to do we need to align efforts and coordinate them as an ecosystem? Is it better kind of let this emergent kind of process play out with all these different models? What are the roles that we need right now to support this vision of, both permanently affordable housing and also kind of building economic security and addressing the racial wealth gap? So just kind of broadly, like, how do we think about this ecosystem and these, is it a good thing we have like so much going on? Do we need to coordinate? Where do we go from here?
I think that we also live in such a scarcity mindset, and we all have to like kind of keep our noses down and focus on our model, our mandate, because especially we're incredibly lucky because of the voter initiative where the funds go to the city of Seattle to administer to us. They don't go through the Office of Housing or other city departments. So I think that sorry, I just kind of lost my train of thought. Can you, Derek, say the question again, just really briefly at the
Yeah,
end?
part of what I'm wondering about is like this one idea. There's like an emergent process, like let many,
Yeah,
flowers bloom, or do we need coordination and alignment?
thank you. So where I was going with that was, so we're all focused on our specific funding models, where we're getting that money from, needing to show proof of concept, needing to meet all of this criteria in order to get dollars from the city, the state, or the federal government. And that can unintentionally create like blinders because you have to do that in order for your organization to stay there. So I think it's important for both of them, but I think it is critical for us to also look at how we band together to fight under this banner. I know, Derek, we talked about this when we had coffee the other day, under this banner of we are all trying to fight against the private accumulation of capital and the private markets monopoly of our rental and home ownership system. How do we also keep check of protecting each other, protecting each other's resources, making sure that we're not pitting affordable housing dollars versus social housing dollars or equitable development dollars against home ownership dollars? There is enough wealth to go around. We should be checking in with each other if we are hearing about other people's funding sources or that there's going to be extra hoops that folks have to go through from the city, the state, or whatnot. I'm not going to touch the federal government. I don't believe we can change a whole lot there, just to be real. But how do we make sure that we're working together to protect each other's resources, not go after each other's resources, and also over time push to get our market share of non-commodified housing up? Again, it's about 5-6%. How do we get that to 20 and 25% of the rental homeownership market, which we see from international studies is where you start to see the private market actually having to compete with community land trusts, social housing, affordable housing. That should kind of, in my opinion, be our North Star. Otherwise, we are just going to continue to be at the whims of a for-profit cannibalizing model.
Thanks. Pearl, what's your thought, having been to, in so many different spaces? Yeah, any thoughts on this question of more alignment needed or just kind of making sure there's lots of different options and choice you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should be aligned. There's a like in nonprofit world, um, sometimes it can feel like competition, and it shouldn't be because we're all trying to create opportunity for people that want opportunity to own, right? But sometimes it does feel that way, and it shouldn't. And I've been afforded the opportunity to work for different organizations, a couple different, and I've always been adamant about working together, and it's important for us to pick each other's brains, sit down, see if we can connect on whether it's financing or whatever. Just connect. Connection is the biggest key. I don't want to say financing or anything. Connection is the biggest key. So working with other organizations to figure out, you know, hey, this person might not work for, my organization, but they'd be a perfect candidate for you. And I've done that, like even the work that I used to do before, kind of what got me into nonprofit work is, I was working for um, I was working for a brokerage early years ago, and I found a lot of clients that weren't able to buy homes in Seattle. And I did my research, and I would volunteer for these organizations. I volunteered for Homesite and Homestead and all these different organizations to just be like, hey, just to get familiar with what they're doing, to see how they worked and if they worked. And the ones I've worked for did work for people. And I was able to send them that way. Go co-buy this different organization. I was like, okay, some of my people aren't able to buy homes. Where can I send them? So I don't get paid on that, but I can get them to where they want as a goal. So there should be um, I think there should be connectivity. We should be connected. I like working with other organizations. It's important to me. I have great relationships with, from Habitat to Homesite to. I love it. I love working with people that are doing this work, that are on the ground. I love working with El Centro. I love working with these different, which they do rental. Like, and you find out different things, hey, we have this new development, but our core is here. I don't know if our community wants to move there. And that's good to know. Some people want to stay in place and be like, this is where my resources are. These are where my community is. Even though this is a great opportunity, it might be a great opportunity for someone else. So having these conversations open up, my mind and my spirit to be like, okay, this might not work for you, but this might work for you. And it always comes back to that. What works for people, the individual. But working together is, I think, key in my life. I think I've never met Tiffani before, but I'm excited now. I've done my research and I'm excited about social housing, as a resource for people that might want that opportunity. Now that I have this in my mind, I'm like, okay, oh, this works for you. I feel like I'm a connector, like, okay, this might work for you. So let's send you over. Let's see if we can send you and connect you to this person. So now I have a new relationship to be like, okay, oh, cool. This is great. This is going to be great. So that's exciting. I think people should work together. I'm excited to see how us in social housing could work. If this opportunity doesn't work for them, what's one works for them? It just opens up a world to me, and I'm excited. Hopefully, I wasn't too long-winded. I can.
Yeah, I love how you approach the work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. People-centered, obviously. So Jesse, so we're going to open it up now, but yeah, starting with Jesse, and if there's any other comments or questions folks want to get in the queue, feel free. But
Hey,
Jesse,
thanks,
feel free to
Derek.
jump in if you still have.
Thank you. I am going to stay offline right now, but thank you so much for sharing so much. You all have dedication, and that you're the silent heroes. So I just want to say that every person here on this call holds a piece of this work, including me, and we have our own systems and our own forms and our own websites and our own funding, and nobody planned it that way. It just seems like it was built for us to solve independently. And that separation is becoming almost the problem that we're even trying to fix and address. At least I am working on that. And so I'd like to hear from you, Pearl and Tiffani. Like you said, people should work together. We're doing great work together. And just looking at the infrastructure that's either offline or online here in Seattle, what has worked for you and allows you to work well across groups, across those lines, and not independently?
Great question. And I'm going to have maybe Catherine weigh in quick, and then we'll let Pearl and Tiffani close with thoughts on both. Catherine.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I just had a question after that, but that was a good one. So I want to hear the response to that, to Jesse's
Okay.
question. Yeah.
Okay. We'll pause on that one then. Go ahead. Yeah, any thoughts?
One of the main reasons that we ran the social housing initiatives, both as initiatives and not going through the legislative process, was to build community, was to build community power, was to go out and have conversations with neighbors from all over Seattle about what it is like to rent in the city of Seattle, and wouldn't they like it if their rent didn't go to a private landlord that's there to get as much money as possible. That opened up space, and if I say it shifted the Overton window of what's possible. What Pearl is doing, what limited equity co-ops are doing, is shifting what's possible. So I think it is really about getting back to this communal idea of hyper local organizing, talking across difference, showing up authentically and ready to learn. The Pacific Northwest, Pearl, I'm from Oregon. We really got to get over this kind of passiveness, and I'm sure no one in this room is that, but we have to have generative conflict. We have to talk about things that we don't agree on, be open to critique, be open to hearing other perspectives and finding ways to work together. I think that just speaking for the more global left, we really have an issue if we don't agree with someone 100% of the time, all the time, then we cast that person off. We should really stop doing that, and we should find the ways that we do work together and push things together, because we show through these initiatives. We've shown, like, Tacoma has this really great tenants group that's fighting against private landlords. Not everyone can run an initiative or has the resources for that or the time or wants to do that. So I think just getting into your community, showing up, taking care of each other, not depending on like the federal government to do that for us, is really the best that I can give, and just not falling into this is what's possible, so I'll only work within those lines when I'm approaching political change, but always pushing up against that because no one else is going to do that. But yeah, I've been very blessed to have this group of folks who I've been organizing with in House Our Neighbors, even though I'm now at the social housing developer, because it's given me hope and grounding in some of the most tumultuous times that I've lived through. So just get involved and find your folks and just push back against what others say isn't possible.
Great. And I know that we're kind of at the end of the hour. I want to hold that, shifting what's possible and connecting. Pearl, any last words for the group?
Let's continue to work together. I mean, let's keep, my whole thing is like, I want to motivate, help, and support my community. And Tiffany, I was born in Eugene, Oregon, Sacred Heart Hospital, but I was raised here. So I have that duality. But, but, um, um, like, I just want to work and see this work. That's why I'm here. I'm like, I see these different connectors, and how can we create opportunity, or how can we point people in the right direction? How can we handhold a little bit people through this process? Because it's not easy. None of this stuff is easy. But if we have each other's support, if we have each other's feedback, conversations with different organizations to be accountable, to be wrong, to be right, to feel like you're right and maybe be wrong, to all of it, to open up ourselves to like what we could do together. We're stronger together. Um, yeah, and that makes me excited. It makes me excited to continue to do this work and to be here in any capacity I could be here to help, to have conversations, to do the actions, to do the work. It's exciting. And I think someone said Philly, Seattle can be passive aggressive. It can't be. It depends on where you're at. Me and Jaguna were both in Philly for a little bit. So it can be real out there. But I don't, I'm not trying to be, I don't want to be aggressive, but I want to be passionate about this work. So
Yeah.
I'm passionate. I'm going to continue to be passionate.
Thanks for bringing that passion, Pearl, and making this happen today. And thanks for Tiffany for sharing all your wisdom, and Laura for helping put this together for everybody in the chat. We appreciate it. We'll come back together again. So stay tuned. And yeah, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.